Good afternoon, or good morning, I should say. Everybody good on the cameras and audio sounds okay? All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks very much for being here today. It's my honor to represent the men and women of the Colorado State Patrol to talk about what matters most to the men and women of our organization, and that's saving lives on Colorado's roadways. My name is Colonel Matthew Packard. It's a privilege to serve as the chief of the Colorado State Patrol. I'm going to start today with a number. In fact, it's really the only number that I pay close attention to in my role as the chief of our organization. That number is 716. As of this week, there have been 716 lives counted as lost on Colorado's roadways in the year of 2023. And if you take a moment to pause to think about how incredible that number is, incredible in all of the wrong ways. That's 716 families, 716 loved ones, brothers, cousins, neighbors, mentors, people that are no longer here because something happened on our roads that took them away from us. That number is also 716 opportunities for us to prevent death on Colorado's roads. This is something that we can do as a community, as professionals, and as a state to really have a positive impact on the quality of life in the great state of Colorado, and so that we can enjoy all of the beautiful things that happen in our state. So 716 is a big deal. I'm going to give you some good news, however. Statewide, that's about a 6% reduction when compared to 2022. In fact, it's the first time since 2019 that we saw a reduction year over year in traffic fatalities in Colorado. That is something to celebrate. That is something that we should grab onto and learn from and figure out what worked in 2023 to start this downward trajectory. But make no mistake, we have work to do. There is so much more that we can do as professionals that are out there working on the highways, that are designing the roads, that are licensing drivers, that are out there enforcing the law. We can do so much more, but we needed to do it collaboratively. And if there's nothing else you hear from me today, what I really want to take home, y'all to take home, is that every person that's out there that's driving a car, that's sitting behind the steering wheel, every family member of someone that's holding a steering wheel has a part of this as well. We can help encourage each other to make sound driving decisions. We can remind people to have a sober driver. We can remind people to drive the speed limit. And of course, when you're the one holding the wheel, that onus, that responsibility lies on you. I'd like to talk about a few of the leading causal factors that our troopers and our port officers and our comm officers are noticing as we're out there investigating these crashes. You've seen in our releases already, but speed leads the way. Speed results in the vast majority of our fatal and injury crashes. And it's the easiest to control. Really, it really is. There's a little pedal in your car, and you can push it as hard as you need to, but not too hard. And I'll tell you, as I've enforced the law over the course of my couple of decades career, I've heard all kinds of reasons why people speed. Sometimes they're running late. Sometimes they got to get to where they're, for whatever reason. But when you really do the math and you take some time to look about the value, the benefit, the return on speeding, even 10 over, we're measuring that time difference. Sometimes it's nothing because of other factors that are at play. But even in the best scenario, even traveling across a state, you're usually measuring that time difference in seconds. It's just seconds. And what's it cost when you're driving that fast? Well, your perception and reaction time changes. You travel a greater distance when you're going 10 miles an hour over the speed limit if you were going the speed limit. And what do you miss? You miss the deer that might run out in front of your car. You miss the changing road condition. Colorado's pretty common, pretty well known for that, in fact, that when you're driving anywhere, whether it's mountains or on the plains, you come over a rise, you go around a corner, you pop over a hill, and the weather is very, very different. We've all experienced that, whether it's going through the tunnel at the top of Loveland Pass or out in the plains. Seconds, miles, corners make a difference. And if you're going the speed limit, your ability to navigate those changes are far better than if you're doing something otherwise. And of course, impaired driving. This continues to just, I'm at a loss for words why we continue to have this problem. The number of impaired driving fatalities last year actually went down, but it still accounts for about a third. About a third of the people that lost their life in Colorado were at the hands of an impaired driver. That's over 200 lives in our state alone. It makes no sense to me. It's so easy to use a ride share. It's so easy to call a friend. There's so many options. And here, I'm just going to be blunt. Driving impaired is a selfish decision. It is a decision that you make to take other people's lives into your hands. And I can't come up with any other category in our society where people are so willing to do that. So why are we accepting of this? I can tell you the Colorado State Patrol is 100% not. And we will continue to focus all of our efforts on ridding this state of impaired drivers. Our troopers are well trained. They are drug recognition experts. We have a DUI task force within the patrol that's moving around the state based on our data. We are going to do everything we can to hold impaired drivers accountable. And we're going to do it with our partners. We do it with the police departments and the sheriff's office all over the state. And we will be unwavering on our commitment to do just that. Our state has also experienced an increase in deaths and injuries related to vulnerable road users, pedestrians. In fact, we're setting records, a significant increase in the number of pedestrians that were killed on Colorado's roads last year. And these factors that I've talked about already are involved in those crashes as well. In fact, when you're drunk, it's harder to see a pedestrian. When you're drunk and walking, you're more likely to step out into dangerous sections of the road and be hit. So if you're either driving the car or walking around the roads, you need to be attentive. Heck, you need to be sober. It seems so logical when you say it in a room like this. But together we can do more. Bicyclists. We've had several high-profile bicycle-involved crashes in this state. There's a law in our state that says you have to give a bicyclist 3 feet. We need to pay attention to that law. And if you're riding, please wear gear that makes you easy to see and be mindful of the traffic that's around you as well. And I'll close on this topic, construction zones. In fact, we saw, I think, about a 60% increase in fatalities in construction zones in this state. And being here at CDOT, where so many of those folks report to and work, working in those zones, the likelihood of being hurt in that is just tragic. And again, all you have to do is slow down, be sober, and of course, put down that distraction as well. We're working with the legislature on having an impact on that in that category as well. So again, there's so much that we can do, but it all starts with you. And if we pay attention to what happened over the last 2023, again, a 6% reduction, our friends and neighbors are figuring this out. So let's take their lead and continue to be a strong voice for traffic advocacy, traffic safety, because I'll tell you this unequivocally, the quality of life in your community is significantly influenced by your ability to travel safely on Colorado's roads. So do your part, and I promise you, we here at the state will do ours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief Packard. That was great. Thank you very much. My name is Keith Stefanik. I'm the CDOT Chief Engineer. A year ago, at this time, our state was coming off the deadliest year ever on our roads. A record 764 people were killed with 3,700 serious injuries. This past year, I'm happy to say the fever broke. Traffic deaths fell for the first time since 2019, declining 6% statewide. This is indeed good news. As we work to maintain and build transportation infrastructure that serves Colorado's diverse regions and communities, we acknowledge and prioritize equity in our transportation safety through seeking fairness and mobility and accessibility. As we engage diverse voices and perspectives, it's also important to promote a positive traffic safety culture and continue the state's initiative with advancing transportation safety. This initiative takes a comprehensive approach to road safety through 5 emphasis areas: safe roads, safe driving, safe people, post-crash care, and safety culture. The goal to this initiative is lofty, which is to change the traffic safety culture in Colorado and reach 0 deaths or serious injuries. The substantial decrease in some risky behaviors on our roads in 2023 was helped by standing up this initiative and coming together with stakeholders to create tangible, actionable items and strategies that will produce results. Today, I'd like to announce the launch of a new awareness campaign called Shift into Safe. You'll see the slides next to me here that are just a few examples of the campaign that we'll be deploying in 2024. A key component of transportation safety interventions is understanding that people make mistakes. This is why we strive to build resiliency and redundancy into our transportation system. This means installing cable rail, rumble strips, and creating roundabouts instead of 4-way intersections, improved striping, and much more. Some of our most important work is protecting bicyclists and pedestrians. One project I'd like to highlight is Colorado 119, a safety and mobility project. This adds several protected bike and pedestrian features on a popular cycling route. The project also includes features to enhance bus transit options between Longmont and Boulder. We know that some cyclists prefer to ride on the road shoulder, so the project includes rumple strips on the shoulder to keep inattentive drivers on the roadway where they belong. Other engineering improvements can be found in CDOT's Revitalizing Main Streets program. To date, the program has awarded $75 million to over 240 community grants. Transportation safety should transcend ownership and county lines. And as a result, CDOT annually invests over $90 million in local community partners through grants to advance the Transportation Safety Initiative. CDOT funded a completion of new sidewalks and ADA ramps through the downtown Kersey, a new bikeway in the city of Broomfield, and safer walking and biking path for children going to and from school between the towns of Westcliff and Silver Cliff. Rural areas of the state tend to have higher crash rates as well. For this reason, CDOT continues to fix Colorado's rural roads in one of our largest investments through our 10-year plan. Despite all this momentum, too many people are still being killed on our roadways. Last year, there were 716 traffic fatalities according to preliminary estimates, something that none of us should tolerate. Indeed, the only number that is tolerable is 0. Everybody, whether you walk, ride, roll, or drive, you should get home safely. And speaking of walking, much more needs to be done to protect our vulnerable roadway users, such as pedestrians and bicyclists. Sadly, last year was a record for pedestrian deaths. Bicycle fatalities jumped by 1/3. Just 2 types of roadways users make up a heartbreaking 21% of all traffic deaths in our state. We did, however, see some promising trends this past year. After hitting a record last year, motorcyclist deaths are down between 10%. 12% fewer occupants of cars and trucks were killed last year. 12% of people in this state still don't buckle up. Others are on their phone, driving distracted, and about 1/3 of our fatal crashes involve impairment, increasingly with alcohol or another controlled substance. Speed, as we heard the chief mention, is a top contributor to crash severity. To address careless driving, this year our CDOT Highway Safety Office will award over $13.5 million in federal funds from our National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to local partners engaged in education and awareness. That's another important area for us to focus. Finally, it's important to recognize the heroic efforts of the Colorado State Patrol and other law enforcement agencies in removing drivers from the road before they crash. Undoubtedly, without their selfless efforts, we would see many more people killed on our roadways. They are truly saving lives every single day. Law enforcement efforts alone can't solve the problem of rising fatalities on our roadways. Drivers must do their part as well. I'll conclude by reminding everyone that we must recommit ourselves to safety. This includes always buckling up, keeping our speeds down, staying off our phones, and never driving impaired. Thank you.
I have to lower it just a little bit. Good morning, everybody. My name is Electra Bussell. I'm the Senior Director for the Division of Motor Vehicles in the Department of Revenue. And I am honored to be here with our traffic safety partners, State Patrol, CDOT, and City and County of Denver. I think all of us, you've heard it now from both speakers, all of us together can make a difference. We also have some personal responsibility on drivers making good choices as well, and we'll talk a little bit about that. As you've heard, the good news is we have seen decreases in fatalities on our roadways, but there is much more to do, and we need to continue to be diligent in our efforts and focus on all road users, and specifically those vulnerable road users like pedestrians and bicyclists, where we saw fatality increases. We know that proper driver training and education, coupled with enforcement and appropriate consequences, are critical to curbing crashes and fatalities. The DMV is focused on ensuring our drivers are effectively trained in credentials. In fact, we probably are the first state agency to touch drivers when they are first getting their permit. And that's where good behavior and good strategies and good habits start. We need, as part of the DMV, not only are we focused on education and training, but you also have to make sure their driving record is accurate, that citations are on the driving record on a very accurate and real-time basis so that when law enforcement pulls someone over, they know exactly who they have in front of them. We also administer prevention tools such as the ignition interlock device, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we're talking about impaired driving today. In our efforts to keep unsafe drivers off the road, the DMV created an educational website where you, or whether it's you or someone you love or someone you know, should not be on the road. The DMV's webpage, the Concern for a Loved One's Safety webpage, includes things like how do you have that driving conversation, how to identify the first signs of change, when to think about retiring from driving, and planning for the future without a driver's license. A really difficult decision for many, many people, especially our seniors and folks that have issues that affect their ability to drive. And so we thought, what a great opportunity to educate folks and provide people tools to be able to have those conversations. I also wanted to speak quickly about the importance of prevention and how our ignition interlock program that the DMV administers for the state. These are some pretty big numbers I'm going to give you right now. Last year alone, it is estimated that IIDs prevented 54,960 attempts to drive impaired. So that's not a one-for-one. That might be people trying more than one time, but 54,960 attempts that a ignition interlock device prevented that impaired driver from driving. And then there is various groups that extrapolate that into how many lives potentially saved, and that number is 50 when you base it on Colorado's numbers. So 50 lives saved, countless injuries saved, 54,960 attempts. We believe the interlock ignition program is working, and we are proud to administer that program for the state of Colorado to support our law enforcement partners who are out there on the road every day risking their lives. The premise of the interlock program is to allow people that have DUIs to continue driving, continue working, being able to take their kids to school, but there is a personal responsibility there in choice of not driving impaired or not attempting to drive impaired. Lastly, as part of our role in the Advancing Transportation Safety Program, the DMV will focus on developing, in coordination with our safety partners, a comprehensive road safety education plan to reinforce the importance of good driving strategies and decisions, focusing on critical issues like impaired and distracted driving, and avoiding collisions with vulnerable road users. Our goal is to ensure that all road users understand the importance of responsible decision-making and the potentially life-changing impact their choices can make on our roads and on others. Together with our traffic safety partners and the people sharing the roads, we are focused on making our roads safe. Thank you very much.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for inviting me here today. And you're going to see a lot of synergy of what Denver is going to speak about with our partners here. I'm Jennifer Hillhouse. I'm the Director of Transportation Mobility Planning for the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. And while we are encouraged of some of the numbers that our state partners shared here today, specifically the overall decreases in fatalities, we're greatly concerned about the loss of life we're experiencing across Colorado and here in Denver among our vulnerable roadway users. These are people, our family, our friends, our coworkers, and they're walking, they're biking, they're driving, they're taking transit just to get to their destinations. To make our city's streets safer, we identified a high injury network as our priority. These are 5% of our streets that make up 50% of our traffic fatalities in Denver. We're now placing greater focus on specific locations on the high injury network where more fatal and serious injuries are occurring. We're grateful for CDOT and our funding opportunities that help make the changes that we need to make to slow drivers down, as you heard as a theme of speed here, and offer greater protection for those walking, biking, rolling, and taking transit. Where we make safety improvements, we see safer streets. We're excited to be utilizing Safer Main Streets program funding from CDOT and DRCOG to make pedestrian safety improvements on 2 arterial roadways that are just a few blocks away from here. On Federal Boulevard between 23rd and 27th Avenues, we're upgrading pedestrian ramps. We're adding concrete bulb outs and to slow vehicle turns. We're installing a hawk signal to stop vehicles and that are crossing the street and making it more easily to cross. In a couple of weeks, we anticipate kicking off the construction of West Colfax Avenue Pedestrian Safety Improvement Project. This project will install medians between Irving Street and Sheridan Boulevard to decrease pedestrian crossing distance, provide people a refuge that are on foot with safe places to stand when crossing the street, and reducing those left turn and conflict points between people and driving. We're also adding bulb outs at intersections to slow vehicle turning movements and to calm the traffic along the corridor. These are just 2 examples of how we're working to retrofit the streets with infrastructure that makes travel safer. We're also focused on building a better transit network, with transit being the safest way to travel. We've been tracking this since 2017, and not a single individual has died, or we have not had a fatal with somebody riding a bus and taking transit. We can solve the problem of traffic fatalities alone. We cannot do it. We need our partnerships. Eliminating fatal and serious injury crashes requires a multi-pronged safe systems approach, what you heard the chiefs both talk about. It's safe streets, it's safe speeds, it's safe road users, and safe vehicles. It requires better design, really focusing on building that redundancy in the system that account for mistakes that will be made. Slower speeds, really, really critical for us to think about how we calm traffic on our roads. And reduction in risky driving behaviors, such as the impaired driving and those numbers that we heard about, distracted driving, putting down our phones and paying attention when we're driving, and have that responsibility. And we're seeing a lack of seatbelt use. The numbers that we've seen, that if we just wear a seatbelt, the lives that could be saved on our streets. Also, a thing that we're tracking is, looking at the consideration of vehicle purchasing. We know that our vehicles are getting, bigger, heavier, and faster, and that creates more of a dangerous crash condition out there. And tackling this problem, as we've heard, it's going to take us all working together. The partners up here, the community that is listening, and just know that DOT is committed to partnering to reach this regional goal of 0. And thank you for having me.
Good. We're going to take questions from the news media, both online as well as in person. I think I'll start with anybody from the news that's in the audience has any questions for any of our speakers. Okay. Has anything come through online? Any questions from the general audience? Yes.
From the media. This is for Colonel Packer. When I've seen you a bunch of times on YouTube giving news conferences, when you talk about the data, sometimes you have a little bit of an anger to you that you're upset about this. What are your feelings now? Are they mixed with the staff?
I would say I'm cautiously optimistic. It is angering. It's maddening what causes the majority of these crashes. A third of these people are impaired. You heard about the seatbelt issue, and it's such an easy thing to do. And the Colorado State Patrol is filled with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of professionals that have truly dedicated their lives to making the roads safer. And when something that is so easy can be done to prevent people from dying, and it doesn't happen, it is absolutely frustrating. But as I mentioned, we're making progress. I mentioned 2019 was the last year we saw a reduction. My memory is in 2019 we had 597 lives lost. And I recall traveling around the state, as I do every February meeting with the women and men of the Colorado State Patrol, and celebrating the fact that we are below 600 lives lost. And then pointing that we still had so much work to do, but we got past the 600 threshold. And here we are celebrating a 6% reduction, and we're still at 716. right? It'll probably, over the next couple of days, get up around 720 just because of the way that data evolves. But it's just so, it's such an alarming thing. And if nothing else from me, and whether it's anger and frustration in the moment or optimism that we're doing the right thing, I just want to help light a fire in people's hearts, in their minds, that this is such an easy thing for people to do so they can go home at night. And just come with our trooper, come with our VA just once, when they knock on somebody's door at 2 o'clock in the morning, and let them know that somebody did something that took their loved one's life away. When you look at that body on the road, or when you look in that young person's eyes to tell them that mom or dad's not coming home, like that is a match to start a passion like none other. And so many of us in this room and so many of us that do this work have that, and we need more people to realize that. So it's, again, I'm optimistic that we're making the right headway, but man, we have work to do. 716 doors that got knocked on. I mean, think about that.
Anything surprise you with the data that you're looking at that made you say, I have no idea that this is coming out?
I'd like to say I stay on top of that data a lot, but I think that this increase in pedestrians, bicycles, and the construction zone is alarming. Like that 60% in construction zones. We work really hard to do added enforcement. I know CDOT and all the local transportation departments work really hard to make sure that's done safely, and people continue to ignore it. I mean, can you imagine a more well-signed thing on our roads than you got a construction zone going ahead? And the fact that we're seeing this 60% increase in crashes involved in those areas, that is alarming. And I know that we'll work with CDOT and our local partners to see if we can get our heads around and tackle that issue. But in pedestrians, I mean, this is, we've been walking around roads for a long time, and the roads are here. We're getting so much better. You hear about the added infrastructure. You drive through Denver and see all of the steps that have been done from an engineering perspective to make it safer, but somehow we continue to overcome those. That's on both the drivers and the pedestrian side. So these are things that are alarming. Surprising, I would say, may be a strong word, but I think that's clearly an area that we need to lean into, provide more focus.
With the increase in construction accidents or with involving people, what can you pin that on as far as is it distracting because of some reason, or is it I mean, what is the actual, or how would you say, what is the correlation between increase and construction?
I think speed continues to lead the way here. And the vast majority of these construction zones have a lowered speed limit. And that's on purpose, right? Because there's pedestrians walking around, there's less shoulders, there's tighter curves as our workers are trying to improve the infrastructure. So I think we continue to do better from an enforcement perspective, but again, the speed limit lowered for a reason. This isn't us trying to find ways to write more tickets. This is us trying to make the roads safer in the moment as we're building them, but also in the long term to make the roads stronger to support safe transportation. 60% in 23 compared to 22.
This was online from Denver 7, pathway reference, working with Colorado legislature on distracted driving. Can you add a little bit on that?
Yeah, we're, with the support of the Governor's Office and the Department of Transportation, we're looking at having a stronger distracted driving law in this state. There's actually a pretty strong traffic safety package that we're coming together, but here's the punchline is you shouldn't have a device in your hand while you're driving a car. There's so much technology out there, whether it's Bluetooth or voice to text, or can't buy a car anymore that doesn't have this technology that's embedded inside. So that's what we're working with the legislature to make that crystal clear. You shouldn't have something in your hand while you're driving a car.
We know about Vision Zero for years, where the goal was to bring zero traffic related deaths, but then we see bicyclists, pedestrians, those numbers continue to rise. How confident are you, this would be not only for yourself, but everybody else who is talking, how confident are you that what's being done will actually go and bring that number down to zero?
I'd certainly defer to Denver, who's been a leader in Colorado on the Vision Zero campaign. But I can tell you that from my experience, and the way we handle our enforcement operations with the State Patrol, and we are data-driven. And I am confident in the efforts like Vision Zero, because it's across the board, right? It includes enforcement, it includes education, it includes engineering. It's everything. So we're not picking the shiniest star and trying to run this into the ground because we think that might be the difference. We're finding all the stars and shining the ones that need to get brushed up a little bit, but it is truly a holistic process. I know that safer roads are safer to drive on. And I know that when surveys, they say, we want to see more troopers because I feel safer when I see a trooper. So all of those things are part of that Vision Zero, and of course I can turn it over to Denver as well, but I am confident it's going to work. It's not going to happen tomorrow though. And I think we need to have a sense of urgency, but we also need to be patient in how we deploy those efforts.
Chief, I don't know that I have, much else to add, but since you called me up, happy to kind of talk through it. Yes, I think we have to be confident in it, right? Because there's no other number that we can drive to other than 0. And when we think about these lives, right, and you mentioning about knocking on doors, it literally gives me the chills, right? These are people that our jobs around engineering, creating those safer streets is something that we have to continue to act in urgency with. We know, as I mentioned, where we do the safety improvements, it works. We saw West Colfax doing some re-signal timing on those corridors to be able to control speed and ensure that we were looking at those conflict points. And we went from 5 fatals to 0. I think we have had 1 this last year, but we are seeing these improvements where we're making change. And so now it's time to scale. How do we work with our partners? How do we think about policy? How do we lean on each other and that education and communication to get our community working with us? It's going to take us a while. I mean, when we think about the transit, I talked about reimagining our streets for Colfax BRT would be taking a lane, giving it back to transit. We're also reducing those crossing distances as we do that. CDOT's now moving to Federal, Colorado. These are some of our most dangerous streets in the region. And as we do this, we're going to see great improvement. It takes us time. This doesn't happen overnight. So in the meantime, leaning on community, wear your seatbelt, don't drive distracted. All these things that we're talking about is really, really critical. It's a partnership. None of the folks up here can do it alone. And so leaning on all of our community members to make it happen. But yes, I think we're confident that we can get there. We just need to continue to act with urgency.
Any other questions? Nothing else online? Okay. I'm going to close out this press conference. Feel free to hang out and ask questions one-on-one. Thank you, everybody, for coming.